Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Ms. Carlson coming at ya. I wanted to give you this tutorial to show you how I want this set of slides completed for our most recent assignment. I'm going to remember this time to enlarge the screen. Here we go. So the whole thought process behind this set of slides is that you have graphic organizers so that you can collect information about the theme of willful ignorance in Jack London's To Build a Fire. And just a reminder that these slides are going to be view only when you get them. So to make them editable so that you can work in them, you're going to need to click File, Make a Copy, and then try to, if you can, maybe even like rename the file so that it makes sense to you, maybe like your last name, and then, graphic organizer to build a fire or something like that. You don't absolutely have to do that. That's just a little tip. Also, I want you to be cognizant of the fact that I've got a link to the full text here. You may need or want to go back to the text for certain key information. So I did put a link here to the full text for you. And again, we're finding the theme of willful ignorance in our close reading of Jack London's To Build a Fire. So our unit's essential question, we're in this uncomfortable truths unit, and the essential question that we've got kind of running throughout this unit is, when faced with uncomfortable realities, why do people choose ignorance over truth? It's a really interesting kind of peek into the human psyche and the human condition. And you do not need to answer this question right now. I just want you to know that this is kind of our overarching question for Unit 3, so that the stories and poetry and informational articles we read are relating to being able to answer this question. Why do people choose ignorance over truth? The standards that we're going to be covering in this particular lesson are Reading Literature Standard 1, which is about citing relevant textual evidence. You're going to see that I'm needing you to show me at this point in your senior year that you're able to cite relevant textual evidence to support claims. And then Reading Literature Standard 2 is about understanding complex texts and finding themes or kind of ribbons of ideas that run through stories, novels, poems, literature in general. And then Language 6 is another one where I want you to understand the appropriate use of conventions in standard English. So please be cognizant of your capitalization, punctuation, spelling, all of those things. By your senior year, especially over the course of this year that I've had you in my class, I need to be able to show that you understand the purpose of the conventions, especially when you're in English class. And then when you move on into your professional life, you'll want to, set yourself apart from the others in being able to write in a way that shows you are polished. The targets for this lesson, I want you to be able to understand what the term willful ignorance means, and that's depth of knowledge 1. That just means on this Costa's depth of knowledge, it really doesn't take a ton of skills to be able to define a term. So that's just like at the lower end of depth of knowledge. And then I want you to be able to show that you can recognize where characters display willful ignorance in literature, so that you're able to oh yeah, I can see where he's displaying willful ignorance here. Moving up in depth of knowledge to level 2 is being able to categorize, classify, and that's what you're going to do in the graphic organizers. Is you can show where characters reveal willful ignorance and uncomfortable truths and classify them, like put them in the proper places. And then moving way up to level 3, you're able to cite evidence showing where characters in the story that we read are showing willful ignorance. So you can kind of see it ramps up here all the way from level 1 to level 3. Willful ignorance, this is just a review for you. You had this earlier in the unit, but willful ignorance is when somebody chooses not to learn, not to understand something, a topic or a lesson or whatever the situation is, even though they have the ability to. So it's not about not being able to do it, it's being willing to do it. It's like if you know you need to study for a test, this is like a really low level type willful ignorance, but it's something that we can understand, right? It's if you know you need to study, but you purposely avoid studying because you just don't want to deal with it. Hello, I've been there too. Like, I'm not beyond this. You know what you should do, but you decide not to. It's easier to pretend you don't know or you don't care. I don't really care about grades. I don't really care about this job. So I don't care if I'm late, or I don't care if I fulfill this assignment my boss gave me. Yeah. Okay. So in other words, willful ignorance is when someone purposely ignores facts, purposely ignores the information that's, in their grasp because they just don't want to face a certain situation or deal with certain consequences of knowing. So, what ways does the man in To Build a Fire display these signs of willful ignorance? Well, he ignores experienced advice. He is arrogant and he's overconfident in being rational or in his own rationality. He rationalizes things. Hello, we do that as human beings. We do this a lot. We rationalize things. He refuses to recognize warning signs, or if he recognizes a warning sign, he sometimes just kind of like dismisses it quickly. So, oh yeah, it's cold, but what is cold really? Yeah, it's cold, but I'm dressed for it, or I've experienced cold before. Well, we know as a reader that he does not really truly recognize how dangerous this level of cold is, right? And then the dog relies on instinct, but the man relies on a mindset. And in some ways, that is willful ignorance. The fact that he just keeps relying on this mindset and kind of ignores instinct, if he has any, he's ignoring it. Whereas the dog does not rely on mindset. He purely relies on instinct. And I say he, I don't know if the dog is a he, but all right. So your task is going to be providing text evidence um, for each of these categories that I just mentioned. You are going to take text evidence from, and you're going to see this on a slide coming up here. I've given you a text evidence bank, and you're going to take whichever one applies to each of these categories and drop them in here. Now, I say drag and drop, but I don't know that you're able to do that between slides. So it might be more of like copy and paste the appropriate text evidence. You're going to see what I mean in just a minute. So in the text evidence bank, you've got these 4 pieces of text evidence, and they are right now typed out per MLA citation rules. Please do not change the way these are. I've got them perfectly formatted with the quotes around the text evidence, no period before the last quotation mark, parentheses with the page number inside, and then the period on the outside. Please don't change any of that. I've got it perfectly written for you so that you just need to copy and paste it. And just a little kind of sidebar, I took out the author's last name. Typically in MLA, you will see the author's last name, comma, and then the page number. But because we're only talking about this story, we only need to put that page number there because we know we're only talking about this one story that Jack London wrote. So we just need the page number in this particular instance. So you're going to be taking the appropriate text evidence here and pasting that into the appropriate row on slide 8, which was the last slide we looked at. So I've got in your set of slides here, it says these should be completed in the way Ms. Carlson showed in her video tutorial. And that's what I mean here is what I'm telling you now. All right, you actually did this in a quiz. If you did quiz 3.8, this was part of the quiz. So you're kind of doing this twice, but oh well, that's okay. Then you'll really know it. So in this case, you are going to drag and drop each word into the appropriate blanks. In To Build a Fire, author Jack London shows how willful ignorance can be what? The protagonist ignores warnings about the extreme blank and his own vulnerability, convincing himself that he can handle the journey alone despite clear signs of danger. We definitely learned that this man does not feel vulnerable until the very end of the story. He thinks he's got, if Mother Nature's got nothing on him, right? As a result, he blank the severity of the cold, makes fatal mistakes, and ultimately succumbs to the harsh environment, illustrating the deadly blank of willful ignorance. Then in this one, I'm just going to kind of read, and then you're going to be able to see that because you completed that slide 8 with the appropriate text evidence, you're going to be able to put the appropriate text evidence here in this slide. So let's see if you can kind of follow what I mean here. I'm going to take a drink of my tea. I've not been feeling well lately, so I need this to be able to talk here. Part of being human is that sometimes we commit acts of willful ignorance. Most of the time, the consequences of committing acts of willful ignorance are negligible, or they don't really amount to all that much. But sometimes the consequences can be serious. The man in Jack London's To Build a Fire shows several acts of willful ignorance that have catastrophic results. One of the ways the man shows willful ignorance is that he is arrogant and overconfident in his rationalities. For example, he thinks that as long as a man stays rational or keeps his head, he will be okay and can travel alone. This is evidenced on page, and you're going to need to let me know where it says, and then this is where you're going to grab the appropriate text evidence from slide 8. So you need to get everything correct on slide 8 to be able to put the right text evidence here to finish off this thought. And then I want you to change the font from slide 8 to a dark green when you paste it here. That way, when I'm grading, it'll be easy for me to read what text evidence you put here so that I can kind of separate it from the other text on this slide. It'll stick out really, really well here so I can tell that you grabbed the correct text evidence. So you need to find, from if you did slide 8 correctly, what text evidence that I gave you from that text evidence bank, which of those pieces will prove the claim that the man is arrogant and overconfident in his rationalities. So find the correct one. And then kind of the same thing here. Another way the man shows willful ignorance is that he refuses to heed key warning signs that he is in the extreme danger. He believes that because he has had some experience traveling in extreme cold, his current situation is not much different. But we know he's a rookie when it comes to temperatures of this magnitude. And then I've got a piece of text evidence here that I just gave you. But all this, the distant trail, no sun in the sky, the great cold, and the strangeness of it all, had no effect on the man. It was not because he was long familiar with it. He was a newcomer in the land, and this was his first winter. So you can see how giving text evidence just kind of solidifies thoughts that we have about the story, right? So it really gives credibility to our claims. The reader becomes alarmed about the man's nonchalance about the cold when he thinks the cold does not matter, as evidenced on page blank. And then here's where you're going to enter the correct text evidence from slide 8 here. What is the correct piece of text evidence that I gave you that matches that the man is very nonchalant about the cold and he does not think the cold matters much? So find the appropriate one there. The man ignores experienced advice. This can also be considered an act of willful ignorance. For example, the man realizes he should have worn the face protection suggested to him. And then again, I'm solidifying my thought here with a piece of text evidence. He was sorry he had not worn the sort of nose guard Bud wore when it was cold. Such a guard passed across the nose and covered the entire face, page 67. He also was advised not to travel alone in such extreme cold as is evidenced on page blank. And then again, go to the appropriate piece of text evidence that you put from slide 8 here. And be sure to change the font to green or blue, a dark green or blue, please, so that I can read it. Author Jack London uses the dog in the story as a way to highlight how the man's arrogance and his acts of willful ignorance are his downfall. Whereas the dog relies upon instinct, the man thinks he can outsmart Mother Nature. The author shows us that the dog realizes they should not be traveling, the man and the dog should not be traveling in temperatures such as this, because the dog knows this instinctually and does not base its decisions on a mindset. One place in the story where we see the author conveying the man's judgment. Oh man, I need to change this. I don't know what I did here. I messed up the sentence. Let me see what I'm trying to say, and then I'll have it fixed by the time I give it to you. One place in the story where we see the author conveying where the dog's instinct is no match for the man's judgment. I don't know why I have man's judgment twice there. The dog's instinct is no match for the man's judgment. Or wait, am I saying that right? The man's judgment is no match for the dog's instinct? I got to rethink how I want that to say. What I'm trying to say is that the dog's instinct is superior to the man's judgment. So I'll make sure that I get that said correctly. Woo, it just shows you that words matter. But you need to find the place in the story that talks about how the dog's instinct is superior to the man's judgment. And I gave you that again, that text evidence bank, to be able to find that. I am going to go to my teacher version of this because I wanted to show you an example of how I might do this. And I thought I gave myself a sample. Yes, I did. Woo! All right. So my example is going to be different from the information that you have, just because I didn't want to give away one of the answers. So in my example, my text evidence bank is a little bit different. And let's say I want to find the correct spot for the man ignores experienced advice. And then I go to my text evidence bank and I try to find which piece of text evidence best fits that category for the man ignores experienced advice. All right. When it is 75 below zero, a man must not fail in his first attempt to build a fire. The blood in wet and freezing feet cannot be kept moving by running when it is 75 degrees below. No matter how fast he runs, the wet feet will freeze even harder. All this the man knew. The old man on Sulphur Creek had told him about it. Now I know, because I've read this story and I understand the story, I know that even though it says this is all this the man knew, that he got this advice from the old man in Sulphur Creek, I know that he did not heed that advice. He ignored this advice, because I do know toward the end of the story, he definitely failed at attempting to build a fire. Well, he built it, but it went out. I also know he ignored the fact that wet and freezing feet cannot be kept moving by running when it is 75 degrees below. No matter how fast he runs, the wet feet will freeze even harder. Well, we know he ran all over the place in bare feet, bare frozen wet feet. So I know that that is actually a really good piece of text evidence to prove that the man ignores experienced advice. So what I did is I just copied and pasted that piece here. And then I would go to the next one. The man is arrogant and overconfident in his rationality. And I would go to my text bank and I would find what piece of evidence here best fits that. And then I would copy, and you can do that by Control C. I would copy and paste that into whatever category it fits best here. Hopefully that makes sense. And then the last one that I've got to fill out here says, because the man in to build a fire is arrogant and overconfident in his, and then here's another place where you're going to pull from this word bank down here. Whoops, of course it's not letting me do that because I'm on the larger screen here. But you're going to be able to grab that and put it to where you think it fits best. Which blank does it fill in? Is arrogant and overconfident in his blank because he refuses to recognize warning signs and because he ignores experienced advice. He succumbs to the cold and dies a perhaps unnecessary death, whereas the dog, relying on blank, survives. Acts of willful blank may not always have such fatal outcomes, but they are a way for us to see how we may want to avoid the pitfalls of willful ignorance in our own lives. So go ahead and complete that slide. When you get to slide 17, ta-da! It says, I suppose you've realized this already? Question mark. If a person were to take the text from slides 11 through 16 and format it properly, format that text properly, it would create a 6-paragraph essay. Whoa! Hello! Whenever I say the word essay, students go bonkers, so I try to avoid that word. But everything you did on those slides, if we took all that text and put it into the proper formatting, it creates a 6-paragraph essay with text evidence. And that's my whole reason for doing this assessment, is not having you write a 6-paragraph essay, but having you be able to find text evidence that supports claims that we make. And then I'm just letting you know, this is a slide that I'm going to use to assist in my grading of assignment 3.9. So did you copy the Google Slides in a way that enabled you to edit them? On slide 8, did you fill in the proper things? That's worth 8 points. On slide 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Accordingly, did you fill in everything correctly to give you the points for each of those slides? And then did you use the proper conventions? Did you capitalize the proper way, punctuate, spell? If you just copy and paste what I've given you, this should not be an issue. Please don't change things. Please don't put things into lowercase that belong uppercase, and don't move around my punctuation that I've got correct. So that this should not be an issue, but I'm hoping that I don't see an issue. And then were you able to successfully download the slides as a PDF so that you can submit the PDF to the assignment folder? Having a PDF in the assignment folder allows me to stay within the grading screen. I don't have to open up a brand new file each and every time I get to a student's submission. It just takes an extraordinarily long amount of time when you've got close to 200 students. So thank you for doing the PDFs for me. When you've completed the slides, don't forget to click File, Download PDF, and submit the PDF to Assignment 3.9 folder. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial, and I look forward to seeing your fantastic submissions. Have a great day.